Sunlight poured through the dusty blinds of the startup's downtown office as May tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, squinting at the lines of code on her screen. The air conditioner hummed too loudly above her desk, which was shoved in the corner far from the windows where the important people sat. Her back ached from the cheap chair they'd given her 3 years ago when she first joined the company. Around her, the office buzzed with excitement. Men in button-up shirts with rolled sleeves high-fived each other and talked loudly about the latest funding round, $10 million that would change everything. May smiled politely when they glanced her way, but nobody stopped to include her in their celebrations. "Another win for the dream team," shouted Rick, the sales director, popping a bottle of champagne that sprayed across the glass conference room. Everyone cheered. Nobody mentioned that the product they were celebrating wouldn't even exist without May's algorithm. 3 years ago, when the company was just 5 people working out of the founder's garage, May had created the special code that made their app different from everything else on the market. She'd spent countless nights perfecting it, testing it, making it better while others slept. The founder, Vic, had promised her back then, "When we make it big, you'll be taken care of. We're family." Family. The word felt hollow now as May watched Vic hand out bonus checks to the marketing team for boosting user numbers when it was her recent update that had actually kept those users from leaving. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Did they give you the promotion?" May sighed and typed back, "Not yet." It was the 3rd time she'd been passed over. Last week, they'd hired some guy fresh out of college to be her boss, a guy who needed May to explain basic coding concepts on his first day. May grabbed her lunch from the office fridge, leftovers from the dinner she'd eaten at her desk the night before while working late. She found a quiet spot on the building's rooftop to be alone. Below her, the city moved in its busy rhythm, people rushing from place to place. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to be one of them, to work a normal 9-to-5 job where nobody called you at midnight with a small emergency. Her phone rang. It was Vic. "May, the app is crushing for some users. Can you fix it right away?" "I'm on my lunch break," she said, glancing at her half-eaten food. "This is kind of urgent. The new investors are testing the platform today." Of course they were. May packed up her lunch and headed back downstairs. "I'll look into it now." Back at her desk, she quickly found the problem. Someone had changed her code without telling her, breaking several important connections. It would take hours to fix properly, but she could patch it temporarily. As she worked, she overheard Vic in the conference room. "Our tech team is absolutely world-class," he boasted to the investors. "We've assembled the brightest minds in the industry." May rolled her eyes. The tech team was mostly her, plus 2 junior developers who needed her help with everything. On the company website, her name wasn't even listed among the leadership, though less experienced men had their smiling photos and impressive titles displayed prominently. By evening, May had fixed the problem and saved the day, again. The office had emptied out, everyone else gone home to their lives while she remained, making sure everything ran smoothly. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see her notebook where she'd left it earlier, the one containing all her original ideas, including sketches for updates that would make their product even better. Vic stuck his head around the corner. "Hey, still here? Listen, good work today, seriously. Don't know what we'd do without you." May nodded, too tired to say what she was really thinking. "Big things coming soon," Vic continued with a wink. "Really big things." What May didn't know was just how big, and how soon her life would change completely. The storm was already brewing, and tomorrow would bring the winds that would blow her carefully built world apart. The next morning brought rain that pelted against the windows of May's apartment. She hit snooze twice before dragging herself out of bed. The late night fixing the app had left her with barely 5 hours of sleep. Her eyes felt grainy as she brushed her teeth, staring at her tired reflection. Just another day, she told herself, grabbing an umbrella. Just get through today. The bus was packed with morning commuters, all looking as miserable as she felt. May clutched her coffee cup, savoring the warmth and caffeine. She scrolled through her phone, noticing an unusual number of emails from upper management, all sent after midnight. Weird, but not concerning enough to read before she got to the office. When she stepped off the elevator onto her floor, something felt off. The usual morning chatter was missing. People stood in small groups, whispering. A few glanced her way, then quickly looked away. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked Priya from customer service, who just shook her head and hurried past. May rounded the corner to her desk and stopped cold. A cardboard box sat on her chair. Inside were her personal items, the small plant she'd kept alive for 3 years, the framed picture of her family, her spare sweater, even the tea bags from her drawer. "There you are," Vic's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him flanked by Tyler from HR and a man in a suit she'd never seen before. "What's this?" May asked, pointing at the box. Vic cleared his throat. "We need to talk in the conference room." The walk across the office felt like a slow-motion nightmare. Everyone was watching. No one would meet her eyes. Inside the glass conference room, Vic gestured for her to sit. "So, May, as you know, the company is growing rapidly. With our new funding, we're making some strategic restructuring decisions." Tyler from HR slid a document across the table. "We're eliminating your current position." "Eliminating my position?" The words didn't make sense. "I built the core algorithm. I maintain the entire backend. Who's going to do my job?" "We've hired a new development team," Vic said, not meeting her eyes. "Fresh perspectives, you know. The investors thought we needed to scale up with more experienced talent." "More experienced?" May's voice rose. "I have 6 years of experience. I've been here since day one. Your severance is outlined in the paperwork," Tyler continued as if she hadn't spoken. 2 weeks' pay, provided you sign the non-disclosure agreement and the intellectual property confirmation. May looked down at the document, trying to make sense of the words swimming before her eyes. Through the glass walls, she noticed a young man sitting at her desk, already logged into her computer. Her project files were open on his screen. "You already replaced me? Before even telling me I was fired?" Her hands began to shake. "We need to minimize disruption," Vic said, checking his watch. "The new team starts today." "My personal notebooks," May suddenly remembered. "They're still in my desk." "Everything company-related stays here," said the stranger in the suit, speaking for the first time. "All intellectual property belongs to the company." "But those are my personal notes." "Ms. Chen," the man interrupted, "security will escort you out once you've signed the papers." May looked around the room in disbelief. 3 years of her life, countless nights and weekends sacrificed, her best ideas given to these people, and this was how it ended. With a cardboard box and security? "I need time to read these documents," she said, finding her voice. "We need them signed now," Vic insisted. Something in his tone made her pause. They were nervous, rushing her. "Why?" "I'll have my lawyer review them first," she said, standing up. Vic's face hardened. "That's not how this works, May. Either sign now and get your severance, or don't sign and get nothing. Your choice." As if on cue, a security guard appeared at the door. "Ready whenever you are, sir." May looked down at her box of belongings. Underneath her plant was the edge of a black notebook, her original one, with all her initial code designs. They'd packed it by mistake. "Fine," she said quietly, picking up the box. "I don't need your money." As the security guard led her toward the elevator, May clutched the box tightly against her chest, feeling the hard outline of the notebook. They might have taken her job, but they'd forgotten the most important thing. She still had proof that everything they built began in her mind. In the lobby, the rain still pounded outside. May stood frozen, watching people rush by, suddenly uncertain where to go or what to do next. But deep inside, beneath the shock and hurt, something else was beginning to burn: determination. May sat on her living room floor, surrounded by half-eaten takeout containers. 3 days had passed since the firing. 3 days of ignoring calls from worried friends, of staring at job listings without applying, of feeling like a complete failure. Rain continued to pour outside, matching her mood. The box from her desk sat untouched in the corner. She couldn't bear to unpack it. Each item would just remind her of the betrayal. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her older sister, Lynn. "I'm outside your door with coffee. Open up or I'll use my spare key." May sighed and dragged herself to the door. Lynn stood there, coffee in one hand, umbrella in the other, concern written across her face. "You look terrible," Lynn said, pushing past her into the apartment. She surveyed the mess. This is worse than I thought. Thanks for the support, May mumbled, accepting the coffee. Lynn pointed to the untouched box. What's in there? Just stuff from my desk. Have you even looked through it? May shook her head. Lynn marched over and started unpacking it. Wait, Mai protested, but Lynn was already pulling things out. Plant, picture frame, sweater. What's this? Lynn held up the black notebook. My old design journal, May said, reaching for it. I've had it since the beginning. Lynn flipped through the pages. These are all your ideas, the ones they built their app on. Yeah, so what? They own everything now. Do they? Lynn raised an eyebrow. Did you ever sign anything saying they owned your ideas from before you joined? Mai paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. What do you mean? I mean, Lynn said slowly, when you first created these designs, was it before you formally joined the company? Some of it, yeah. I was freelancing for Vic first, then joined full-time later. And what did your contract say about intellectual property? Mai frowned. I'm not sure. They gave me papers to sign when I left, something about IP confirmation, but I didn't sign them. Lynn, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm, looked thoughtful. Do you have a copy of your original employment contract? Somewhere, May said, gesturing vaguely toward a filing cabinet. While Mai searched for the contract, Lynn continued looking through the notebook. There are dates on these pages, and notes about changes you made over time. I always document everything, May said, pulling out a folder. Force of habit. Together, they spread the papers across the coffee table. Lynn read through the employment contract carefully, then looked up with wide eyes. May, this is interesting. The standard IP clause only covers work created within the scope of employment using company resources. But these initial designs, she tapped the notebook, they came before, right? And look here, there's no retroactive clause. What does that mean? May asked, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life. It means, Lynn said slowly, they might not own your original algorithm legally, especially if you can prove you created it before joining them. Mi's mind raced. She remembered something else, the patent application. She jumped up and rummaged through another drawer, pulling out a folder. 6 months ago, the company was moving so fast, there was so much chaos with the funding rounds. I got worried about protecting my work. She spread out more papers. So I filed a provisional patent application for my algorithm, just in case. Lynn's jaw dropped. By yourself, not through the company. They were too busy chasing investors to bother with patents. I paid the filing fee myself, Mai shrugged. Never told anyone because I figured it was pointless. I thought the company automatically owned everything. Lynn grabbed her phone. I'm texting my friend Raj. He's an IP attorney. You need to talk to him, like yesterday. For the first time in days, May felt a surge of energy. She looked at her notebook with fresh eyes. All those nights she'd stayed late, all those weekends she'd sacrificed. She'd documented everything. The evolution of the algorithm, the hurdles she'd overcome, the elegant solutions she'd created. Her name was on every page. Do you think? May hesitated, afraid to hope. Do you think I might have a case? Lynn was already dialing. I don't think you have a case, May. I think you have a bomb. And those idiots at your ex-company just lit the fuse when they threw you out. May picked up her notebook, running her fingers over the pages filled with her handwriting, her ideas, her brilliance. For 3 years, they'd taken everything she had to give. Maybe now it was time for them to give something back. Raj's office smelled like old books and coffee. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with thick legal volumes. May sat nervously in a leather chair that had seen better days, clutching her notebook and the folder with her patent application. So, Raj said, leaning back in his chair, Lynn gave me the basics, but I'd like to hear everything from you. For the next hour, May told her story. About creating the algorithm before formally joining the company. About how the entire product depended on her code. About being fired without warning and replaced by someone who couldn't possibly understand the system she built. Raj listened, occasionally jotting notes. Unlike the fancy lawyers she'd seen on TV, he wore a slightly wrinkled button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His calm demeanor made her feel less overwhelmed. Let me see that notebook again, he said when she finished. May handed it over. Raj flipped through it carefully, paying special attention to the dates. And you're certain you created these initial designs before your employment started? Positive. I was freelancing from my apartment. I even have old emails discussing early versions with Vic. Raj nodded, then examined the provisional patent application. This is interesting. Most employees don't think to do this. Is it going to help? May asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Raj set down the papers and looked directly at her. May, based on what I'm seeing, you have a very strong case. The company built their entire business on your intellectual property, which you never properly assigned to them. Hope bloomed in her chest. So what does that mean? Can I sue them? We could sue, but litigation takes years. I have something faster in mind. Raj turned to his computer and began typing. I'm drafting a cease and desist letter. We'll demand they stop using your algorithm immediately. Mee's eyes widened. But that would shut down their whole business. Exactly, Raj said with a small smile. That's why they'll have to negotiate with us. For the next 3 days, May worked with Raj to gather evidence. They compiled emails, earlier versions of the code, even text messages where Vic had praised her for creating the algorithm. Each piece strengthened her case. Remember, Raj coached her, they'll try to intimidate you. They'll say you're being unreasonable. They'll threaten countersuits. Don't let it shake you. They need your code more than you need them. On the 5th day after her firing, Raj's assistant delivered the cease and desist letter to TechFront's offices by courier. The letter was clear. Stop using Mee's intellectual property within 24 hours or face immediate legal action. May spent that day pacing her apartment, too nervous to eat. What if they ignored the letter? What if they found some loophole? What if they dragged her into court and bankrupted her with legal fees? At 3:42 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, she answered cautiously. May, it's Vic. His voice sounded strained. We received some paperwork from your lawyer today. That's right, she said, trying to keep her voice steady the way Raj had taught her. Look, there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't you come in tomorrow so we can discuss this? May took a deep breath. Any discussion will happen with my lawyer present. This is ridiculous. Vic's voice rose. You can't just threaten to shut us down. We have investors, customers. I'm aware, May said calmly. And all of them are using my algorithm without permission. The line went silent for a moment. Then, in a quieter voice, Vic said, the board wants to meet with you and your lawyer tomorrow at 10 a.m. After hanging up, May immediately called Raj. They want to meet tomorrow. Good, Raj said, but there's something else you should see first. He sent her a link to a financial news site. The headline made her gasp. TechFront shares plummet 15% amid rumors of IP dispute. Below was a photo of the TechFront building with Vic looking worried outside the entrance. The article mentioned sources close to the company revealing a major legal challenge to their core technology. How did they find out so fast? May asked when Raj called back. News travels quickly in tech circles, Raj replied. Someone at the company probably leaked it. This works in our favor. Now they're feeling pressure from investors too. That night, May could barely sleep. Tomorrow, she would face the people who had thrown her away like she was nothing. She checked her email one last time before trying to sleep and found a message from a name she didn't recognize. TechFront's board chairperson. The message was brief. Ms. Chen, we look forward to resolving this situation amicably tomorrow. Rest assured, we value your contributions and wish to find a solution that benefits all parties. May smiled in the darkness of her bedroom. 5 days ago, they couldn't be bothered to learn her name. Now the board chairperson was emailing her directly. Tomorrow would change everything. May smoothed down her blazer as she stood in the elevator heading up to TechFront's offices. She'd bought the blazer yesterday, navy blue, fitted, professional. Her sister Lynn had insisted. You need to look the part, Lynn had said while they shopped. They need to see you as a businesswoman, not just a coder they can push around. Now, as the elevator climbed past each floor, May's stomach tightened. Beside her, Raj looked completely calm, briefcase in hand. He'd worn a proper suit today. Remember, he whispered as the elevator neared the top floor, let me do most of the talking. If they ask you technical questions, keep your answers short. And no matter what they offer at first, we don't accept. Mee nodded, throat too dry to speak. The elevator doors opened directly into the reception area. The same receptionist who had greeted May every morning for 3 years now looked at her like a stranger. "They're waiting in the main conference room," she said coolly. Walking through the office felt surreal. Employees stared as she passed, whispering to each other. A few gave small, encouraging smiles. Mee kept her eyes forward, chin up, the way Lin had coached her. The conference room door was closed. Raj knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Inside sat the entire board of directors, 8 people in expensive suits looking very serious. Vic was there too, sitting not at the head of the table but off to the side. The message was clear. He wasn't in charge today. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Patel, please have a seat," said an older woman at the head of the table. "I'm Diane Harris, chairperson of the board." Mee recognized her from the company website but had never met her in person. Diane's silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes missed nothing as she watched Mai sit down. "We've reviewed your cease and desist letter," Diane continued once they were seated. "We find your claims concerning." "My client's claims are more than concerning," Raj replied smoothly. "They're legally binding. Ms. Chen created the core algorithm before her employment began. The company has been using her intellectual property without proper rights assignment." A man in a grey suit leaned forward. "We have an employment contract that clearly does not include retroactive assignment of IP created before employment," Raj finished for him. "Furthermore, Ms. Chen filed a provisional patent 6 months ago, establishing her claim." The room fell silent. Mai could see the board members exchanging glances. One whispered something to Diane, who frowned. "We're prepared to offer Ms. Chen a generous settlement," Diane said finally. 2 years' salary plus benefits. Raj smiled politely. "That's not adequate compensation for technology currently valued at over $200 million. That's absurd," Vic burst out. "We built this company together, May. You can't just—" "Mr. Nassar, please," Diane cut him off sharply. Her eyes never left May's face. "What exactly are you looking for, Ms. Chen?" For the first time since entering the room, May spoke. "I want what I've earned." She opened her laptop and turned it to face the board. On the screen was a presentation Raj had helped her prepare, showing exactly how central her algorithm was to their product, how it differentiated them from competitors, and how impossible it would be to replace it without essentially starting over. "Without my code, your company has no product," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Your 10 million in funding would disappear. Your customers would leave. Everything you've built stands on my work." The room was so quiet May could hear the air conditioning humming. She took a deep breath and delivered the proposal she and Raj had prepared. "I want 26% ownership of TechFront, making me the largest individual shareholder. I want a seat on the board of directors. I want back pay with interest for the salary discrepancy between me and male colleagues with less responsibility. And I want public recognition as the chief architect of the technology." Someone at the far end of the table actually gasped. Diane's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her pen. "That's a very ambitious request." "It's not a request," Raj said pleasantly. "It's the only alternative to litigation that would likely bankrupt the company." Diane glanced at a man in a dark suit who must have been their lawyer. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "We'll need to discuss this privately," Diane said. "Of course," Raj replied, standing. "We'll wait outside. You have 30 minutes before we proceed with the court filing." As Mai followed Raj out of the room, she caught Vic's expression, a mixture of anger and something else. Something that looked almost like respect. 34 minutes later, Mai and Raj were called back into the conference room. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Several board members had loosened their ties. Papers were scattered across the table. Coffee cups sat empty. Diane Harris looked tired but composed as she gestured for them to sit. "Ms. Chen," she began, "after careful consideration of our options, the board has decided to accept your terms, with minor adjustments." Mi's heart leaped, but she kept her face neutral, just as Raj had coached her. Diane slid a document across the table. 26% ownership, a board seat, and back pay as requested. We ask for a non-compete clause and your commitment to stay with the company for at least 3 years in a leadership position. Reg skimmed the document, then passed it to Mai. The words swam before her eyes. They had actually agreed. After years of being overlooked and underpaid, after being fired and escorted out like a criminal, she was about to become the largest shareholder of a multi-million-dollar company. We'll need to review the details, Reg said calmly, though Mai could see the hint of a smile on his face. But in principle, this appears acceptable. Diane nodded. Our lawyers will work with Mr. Patel on the final language. We'd like to announce this as a planned transition, of course, for market stability. Of course, Reg agreed. As lawyers from both sides huddled to discuss details, Vic approached Mai. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Just for a minute. They stepped into a small meeting room next door. Vic closed the door and ran a hand through his hair. I owe you an apology, he said. A big one. Mai crossed her arms, waiting. When we started this company, it was just us in my garage, dreaming big, he continued. Somewhere along the way, with all the investors and the pressure, I lost sight of what mattered. Who mattered? You threw me away like I was nothing, Mai said, her voice steady. After everything I gave to this company. Vic nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. I know. There's no excuse. The board pushed for restructuring and I just went along with it. You could have fought for me. Yes, he admitted. I should have. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Raj. We're ready for the final signatures. The next morning, Mai stood in the elevator again, but everything felt different. When the doors opened, the receptionist jumped to her feet. Good morning, Ms. Chen. Welcome back. Heads turned as Mai walked through the office. She wore the same navy blazer, but today she carried a different energy. Employees who had barely noticed her before now smiled nervously as she passed. The PR team had worked overnight. A company-wide email had gone out announcing her strategic elevation to the leadership team. The press release described her as the brilliant mind behind TechFront's groundbreaking technology, who was taking on an expanded role as Chief Innovation Officer and board member. Vic was waiting by her new office, not the corner desk, but a real office with glass walls and a view of the city. The nameplate already read Mai Chen, CIO. The team is gathering in the main space, he said. Everyone's eager to hear from you. Mai took a deep breath and followed him. The entire company stood waiting, from the developers she'd worked with to people from departments she'd never interacted with. They all watched her with curious eyes. Vic stepped up to address them. I'm excited to officially welcome Mai Chen in her new role as Chief Innovation Officer and newest member of our board of directors. Many of you may not know this, but Mai is the original creator of our core technology. Without her brilliant work, TechFront wouldn't exist. The irony wasn't lost on Mai. Just 6 days ago, these same words would have meant everything to her. Now, after fighting for what was rightfully hers, they were simply the truth finally being acknowledged. As applause filled the room, Mai spotted the young man who had replaced her. He looked confused and uncomfortable. Not his fault, really. He was just a pawn in a game he didn't understand. When Vic handed her the microphone, Mai looked out at the faces watching her. Some excited, some anxious, some clearly wondering what her leadership would mean for them. Thank you all, she began, her voice clear and confident. I'm looking forward to working with each of you in this new capacity. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found the 2 junior developers who had always been kind to her. They were beaming. I believe in recognizing talent and contribution, regardless of title or tenure. In the coming weeks, I'll be meeting with teams across the company to hear your ideas. Because innovation doesn't come from one person, it comes from creating an environment where everyone can shine. More applause followed, louder this time. As Mai looked out at her new domain, a smile tugged at her lips. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. 18 months passed like a whirlwind. Mai's office wall now displayed the cover of Tech Business magazine with her photo and the headline, The Quiet Revolutionary, How Mai Chen Transformed TechFront. The morning sun streamed through the windows as Mai reviewed the quarterly reports. The numbers told the story even better than the magazine cover. Company value had tripled since she'd taken her position on the board. Her own net worth had grown to numbers that still felt unreal when she thought about them. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Priya, who had been promoted from customer service to head of user experience after May noticed her insightful feedback reports. "The new developers are here for orientation," Priya said. "They're waiting in the community space." May nodded and gathered her tablet. "How many this time?" 15. "The scholarship program really worked. We've got people from backgrounds we've never reached before." May smiled. The scholarship had been her first major initiative as a board member. The Breakthrough Paths program provided training and mentorship to talented people from disadvantaged backgrounds and non-traditional educational paths. The same kinds of people who, like her, might otherwise be overlooked. The community space had once been 3 separate conference rooms. May had the walls knocked down her second month as CIO, creating an open area with comfortable seating and natural light, a place where people actually wanted to gather and share ideas. The new developers looked nervous but excited. May remembered that feeling all too well. "Welcome to TechFront," she began, sitting casually on one of the sofas rather than standing at a podium. "I'm May Chen, Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder." She'd fought for that last title, not for her ego, but for historical accuracy. The company records now properly reflected her role from the beginning. "Each of you is here because you have something special to offer," she continued. "Not just your coding skills, but your unique perspectives. The best innovation happens when different viewpoints come together." As she spoke, May noticed a young woman in the back, listening intently while sketching in a notebook. It reminded her so much of herself 3 years ago that she almost lost her train of thought. After the orientation, May approached the woman. "Nice sketches," she said, nodding toward the notebook. The woman looked startled. "Oh, thank you. I always think better when I'm drawing." She hesitated. "Is that okay?" "More than okay," May assured her. "My own notebooks were key to everything we've built here." She paused. "I'd love to see your ideas sometime." Later that afternoon, May sat in a board meeting, listening to Diane present the latest expansion plans. The other board members, mostly the same people who had reluctantly given May her seat, now looked to her for approval as often as they did to Diane. And finally, Diane concluded, "The May Chen Foundation is ready to launch next quarter. The legal team has completed all the paperwork." May felt a swell of pride. The foundation had been her dream, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting women and minorities in tech through education, mentorship, and startup funding. She was putting a significant portion of her newfound wealth toward ensuring others wouldn't face the barriers she had. After the meeting, May walked through the development floor. Unlike the old days, this space was designed for collaboration and comfort. Teams sat in pods rather than rows, and natural light flooded through windows that once had been covered by blinds. Developers waved or greeted her as she passed, not with the nervous deference of those first days after her return, but with genuine respect and ease. She had worked hard to create a culture where good ideas were valued more than titles or office politics. In the kitchen area, she found Vic making coffee. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted, a partnership of equals based on mutual respect. "The investor call went well," he said, offering her a cup. "They're thrilled with the new direction." May took the coffee with a nod of thanks. "And the inclusive design initiative. Getting attention from other companies. People are starting to copy our approach." "Good," May said. "That's exactly what we want." As she looked out at the company she had helped rebuild, May thought about the journey. From being thrown out with a cardboard box to owning a significant piece of a thriving enterprise. From being invisible to being influential. The woman they had so easily discarded had become indispensable. Not through revenge, but through vision. Not by tearing down, but by building something better. And that, May reflected as she sipped her coffee, was the sweetest victory of all.